On a cold winter evening, Joe's Diner was a warm refuge, a haven against the fierce storm raging outside. The clinking of cutlery and the murmur of low conversation made the place feel inviting, cozy, as if the chill of the world could be shut out by the simple comfort of greasy burgers and hot coffee. The wind howled past the windows, sending leaves skittering across the empty sidewalks. Inside, the warmth surrounded the customers like a soft embrace. And for a brief moment, they were all just ordinary people trying to get through the day. The door chimed softly as a woman stepped in. She wore a wool coat that seemed too thin for the weather, a scarf loosely draped around her neck, and her posture was tense, fragile as though she was holding something back. Her face was pale, beads of sweat already beginning to form at her temples despite the chill. She quickly scanned the diner, her eyes darting to the sign above the restrooms. No one took much notice of her, just another woman trying to get through another evening. She pushed the restroom door open, her hand trembling slightly on the handle. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered faintly as she stumbled toward the sink. Her reflection in the mirror showed a woman on the brink of collapse. Her lips were turning blue. Clutching her chest, she sank slowly to the floor, gasping, struggling to breathe. Her vision blurred as sharp pains stabbed through her chest and back, a sensation far too familiar to ignore. Clara Bennett was dying. A rare heart condition, one she'd kept hidden from most people, had struck again, stronger this time. It was a condition that had almost taken her life before, and now it was threatening to do it again. She was alone, and this time she might not survive. Barely conscious, Clara reached out a trembling hand toward the door, her fingers scraping against the cold tile. Her voice cracked, barely above a whisper. "Help, please." The door opened just a crack. A stepped in, froze, then stared at her with wide eyes. Clara met her gaze, desperate. "Please, help me." The woman took a step back, holding her handbag closer to her chest, then muttered, "I'm sorry," before turning quickly and hurrying out. Minutes later, two young girls entered, their chatter faltering as they noticed Clara on the floor. One whispered, "Do you think she's faking it?" The other replied, "I saw something like this on TikTok. People pretend to pass out and then rob you when you get close." They left without another word. Back in the diner, Daniel stood at the beverage station, pouring a refill for table 6. The girls' voices drifted in the background. "Someone's lying on the bathroom floor. Probably a scam," one of them had said. A frown tugged at Daniel's brow. Something didn't feel right. Ignoring the murmurs around him, he handed off the coffee to a colleague and made his way toward the restrooms, ignoring the confused looks of the others. Women's. A customer called after him, but Daniel didn't stop. He pushed open the door and froze when he saw her. Clara, lying on the floor, lips bluish, eyes barely open. He crouched beside her, his voice urgent but gentle. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" She blinked slowly, her fingers twitching weakly toward him. "My chest hurts," she gasped. Without hesitation, Daniel checked her pulse. It was faint, irregular. Her breathing was shallow, her skin cold to the touch. His first aid training kicked in immediately. He laid her flat on the floor, stripped off his jacket, and covered her with it. "You're gonna be okay," he whispered, dialing 911. "Stay with me, help's on the way." He spoke quickly to the dispatcher, giving the address and describing her symptoms. They confirmed the ambulance was on the way. As he stayed with her, counting her breaths, his focus never wavered. He kept talking to her softly, even though she couldn't answer. "What's your name?" he asked. Knew she might not answer. Her fingers tightened slightly around his sleeve. "That's good. Stay with me." The sirens grew louder, and a few moments later, the paramedics rushed in. He stepped back to let them work, waving them over. In the chaos of the paramedics' swift action, Clara looked at him one last time. Her eyes were heavy with the strain, but she tried to speak. Her voice cracked in a hoarse whisper. "Thank you." Daniel gently squeezed her hand, his voice soft but steady. "It's okay. You're going to be okay." Without another word, he followed the ambulance into the night, unsure who she was, but knowing he couldn't just leave her behind. The hospital room was quiet, dimly lit by the soft glow of monitors. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound, marking Clara Bennett's slow return to consciousness. She blinked her eyes open, the ceiling above her spinning briefly before settling. She was alive, but barely. Clara had spent life in motion, fast decisions, faster meetings, and an empire that demanded all of her. As the CEO of Hearth, one of the fastest-growing restaurant chains in the country, Clara had been hailed as a visionary, a woman who built her empire from nothing but compassion. But that was the story. The truth was much heavier. 6 months ago, she discovered a betrayal from her second-in-command, someone she had trusted completely. That betrayal had brought her to the brink of ruin. Months of legal battles followed, and she had been forced to step down, framed as a sabbatical, but it was a quiet retreat for survival. During her time away, she had gone incognito, visiting small diners and roadside cafes to remember what it felt like to be just a person, not a CEO. She didn't expect to collapse in a bathroom stall in a low-end diner. She certainly didn't expect the one person to help her to be a young waiter, a man with no title, no recognition, but with steady hands, calm eyes, and the purest form of concern. He hadn't asked questions. He hadn't hesitated. He acted purely on instinct, not for recognition, not for reward, but because someone needed help. In that moment, he had unknowingly given her something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. 3 weeks after her hospital release, Clara stood outside the same diner. Gone were the wool coat and the exhaustion that had haunted her eyes. She wore a pair of jeans, a worn hoodie, and her hair was pulled into a loose ponytail. She looked nothing like the CEO of the empire people admired. Today, she came as nobody. She slipped inside the diner after the lunch rush began, taking a seat in the back booth by the window. The place looked the same, walls slightly faded, ketchup bottles half full, vinyl booths cracked at the edges. But there was something about it now. It felt warmer, more familiar. And then she saw him, Daniel, wiping down a table with calm efficiency, his brow furrowed slightly as he lined up the saute. Pepper shakers just so. He hadn't changed. He was still the same quiet, humble man. And he didn't recognize her. She smiled quietly to herself. This was perfect. When he approached, he greeted her with his usual calm energy. "Welcome. You've got the best seat in the house. Window view and away from the kitchen noise." Clara smiled. "Sounds like you've done this before." "A few too many times," he grinned. "Let me know when you're ready." The two of them exchanged casual banter. Daniel brought her food, a simple grilled cheese and tomato soup, and joked that it was the one dish that never disappointed. As they spoke, Clara began to feel the pull of something real, something she hadn't known for a long time, someone who didn't want anything from her, who didn't recognize her name or her title, but simply treated her like a person. She found herself wanting to know more about him, his story, so she asked, "What's your story?" Daniel shrugged, sliding into the her. He gave her a brief history of his life, his mother, his culinary dreams, and the hardships that had followed. Clara listened, drawn to his quiet humility. He had no grand stories, no carefully crafted narratives, but there was something about him that made her want to know more. "Ever think of trying again?" Clara asked, her voice soft, almost hesitant. Daniel shook his head. "Not in the cards right now. I make decent tips, and I like being around people. Feels like I'm still part of the kitchen, even if I'm not behind the stove." Clara felt something stir within her. Here was a man who had dreams, who had been dealt a difficult hand and kept playing. A man who had saved her. After the meal, Daniel surprised her by accepting her invitation to grab coffee after work. They sat at a small cafe nearby, sipping their drinks and talking about books, music, and life. No titles, no agendas, just two people connecting. The next few weeks were quiet, with Clara becoming a regular at the diner. Daniel still didn't know who she was, and she was okay with that. They laughed, talked, and shared more moments together, each one becoming more natural. And then one evening, after their shift had ended, Daniel walked her to the corner of the street. The glow of the street lamp shone down on them, casting their shadows long on the sidewalk. "You're different," Daniel said softly. "You listen, really listen. Most people talk just to hear themselves." Clara looked away, a slight smile tugging at her lips. "Maybe I've had enough of noise." "Whatever the reason," Daniel continued, his voice gentle, "I'm glad you're here." Clara felt a flicker of hope in her chest. After the meal, Daniel surprised her by accepting her invitation to grab coffee after work. They sat at a small cafe nearby, sipping their drinks and talking about books, music, and life. No titles, no agendas, just two people connecting. The next few weeks were quiet, with Clara becoming a regular at the diner. Daniel still didn't know who she was, and she was okay with that. They laughed, talked, and shared more moments together, each one becoming more natural. And then one evening, after their shift had ended, Daniel walked her to the corner of the street. The glow of the street lamp shone down on them, casting their shadows long on the sidewalk. "You're different," Daniel said softly. "You listen, really listen. Most people talk just to hear themselves." Clara looked away, a slight smile tugging at her lips. "Maybe I've had enough of noise." "Whatever the reason," Daniel continued, his voice gentle, "I'm glad you're here." Clara of noise. "Whatever the reason," Daniel continued, his voice gentle, "I'm glad you're here." Clara felt a flicker of hope in her chest. For the first time in years, someone saw her, not as the woman she was supposed to be, but as who she truly was. As they stood under the street lamp, a voice suddenly called out from across the street. "Clara?" Clara turned, and her heart sank. A tall man in a tailored coat approached, his voice full of recognition. "Clara Bennett from the hearth," he said. "My God, I almost didn't recognize you." Daniel froze, his eyes wide with realization. Clara turned to him, her expression calm. The truth was out. But Daniel didn't react with anger or judgment. Instead, he stepped back, his voice quiet. "Menus." And with that, Clara turned and walked away. Daniel left the diner soon after. No goodbyes, no explanation. He vanished without a trace, leaving Clara to reflect on what had transpired between them. But life, as it always does, moved forward. Clara went back to the diner months later. She didn't expect him to be there, but something inside her still hoped. The world was a little quieter now, a little less heavy. And maybe, just maybe, she would find her way back to where it all started, one spoon at a time.